Hey everyone, lately I've been enjoying exploring and hiking in the Los Padres National Forest just outside of Ojai, California, so today I'm going to be hiking at the Rose Valley Falls in this area. To get to Rose Valley Falls, located at the Rose Valley Recreation Area, you will need to drive on Highway 33 in a very mountainous area at about 3,000 feet elevation. Even though this drive is scenic, it might be difficult because of some sharp turns and narrow areas. The Rose Valley Fall is a two-tier waterfall and the largest in this section of the Los Padres National Forest. At the lower section of the falls, which is what you can reach on this hike, water cascades down a limestone formation that's covered in thick moss. Even though the hike itself, which is a fairly easy 0.8 mile round trip, may not take very long, I'd recommend setting aside at least 1 hour to 1.5 hours to explore this area because you may want to spend more time at the waterfalls after arriving. Parking here is limited, but was fairly easy to get because you can pretty much park anywhere along the entrance road as long as you don't block the entrance to a campsite. Okay, so we're here at the entrance of the Rose Valley Campground, and after this is where the Rose Valley Falls Trail will start. This is the gate right at the entrance to the Rose Valley Falls Recreation Area. The trail goes that way, or the road goes that way. After you enter the main gate, expect to walk along the road for only about a few minutes, passing some campsites before you reach the entrance of the trail. There are some nice California poppies along here too. So even though most of this area does have some nice green trees and vegetation right now, you can definitely see the fire damage left behind, which I think would be the Thomas fire that came through this area about 4 years ago. Well, if you can see that cutout in the rock right on that mountain there, that is the top of the Rose Valley Waterfall, which is where you'll end up at the bottom of that at the end of the trail. Someone wrote on a rock right near the entrance to the trail here, "You missed the trail, turn around." This is the only trail marker for the waterfall trail. It's right between campsites 4 and 5. It definitely is easy to miss, so look for this. Even just at the campsites here, there are already some really nice mountain views. After entering the trail between campsites 4 and 5, it's a fairly easy hike with only a small amount of elevation gain and a few creek crossings. It's a really green area here, even though you can see some burned trees remaining from the last fires that were here. Right at the beginning of the trail, there's a creek crossing here, which is still filled with water, which is a good sign for the waterfall ahead. After the initial creek crossing, there are a few more small creek crossings, but those are pretty easy since you only need to walk over a few logs. There are some more stripped, completely burned trees around here. A few of the small creeks along the beginning of the trail were filled with moss, which was interesting to see. There are some more nice plants here and definitely a lot of little creeks and brooks that you have to cross over using these logs. Also, just something I noticed, there are a lot of bees here, so be aware of that before you come. As I noticed, there were a lot of bees near the beginning of the trail, but that's only because there were some flowering shrubs around this area, so don't expect them to be a problem for the rest of the trail. This area is pretty green. It looks like it's recovering well, but you can still see a lot of remains of burned plants and trees. At this point in the hike, it was still very easy, and we were only gaining a small amount of elevation so far. As you can see here, just about after the halfway point of the trail, we started gaining some elevation as we came over some more creeks. Even though this hike is very short, it still passes through a beautiful landscape filled with green vegetation, new growth, as well as burned trees and mountains and creeks. There are some really nice views along this part of the trail of the trees, the creek, and the mountains in the background. The last couple of feet along the end of the trail were the most difficult for me, but that was only because of my shoes, which made the ground very slippery due to its slightly unstable soil. The trail does start to gain more shade trees as you get closer to the end, but I'd still recommend bringing a hat because it may be very hot along the sunny part of the trail. When I initially got to the falls, it was fairly crowded, but I was able to wait out the crowd because I had some extra time, so I was able to experience the falls pretty much alone. Near the end of the trail, there were also some interesting trees to see which had rooted into the side of the hill. The first part of the fall that you see is a moss-covered limestone formation with water slowly trickling downward. Even though the large rocks covering the ground around here are very easy to climb to reach the main side of the waterfall, you should be careful because they can be very slippery around some areas. If you do come at a time that it's not crowded or wait out the crowd, you'll also get many nice photo opportunities because there won't be any people in your shot. Even though you will have to climb over a few large rocks to reach the main part of the waterfall, I recommend doing it because this is a very peaceful area with the water slowly coming down the moss-covered limestone. In a few of the smaller areas of the waterfall, you can also see water trickling off the stone into small pools. The water's slowly coming down here next to the main waterfall too, which is nice. The sound was also really peaceful, which you can hear in the next few clips because there were too many people talking in the background during these clips. This is the only waterfall I've seen in Southern California, and it was definitely beautiful, so I'd recommend this hike even though it is very short and you may not spend a lot of time here.
I know, I'm like,
I really know her. I remember her. It's funny because I've had a lot.
I didn't know who at all. I don't know who you were talking about.
I think she was younger. I've had lots of friends and colleagues and college friends since look like her and have that same vibe.
My favorite part of this waterfall was the main area over the few large rocks, which you can see by climbing over these rocks, which is a nice view of the waterfall, the stone, the moss, and the trees above. After you finish the hike, I'd recommend spending at least 20 minutes at the waterfall because it was definitely a peaceful and beautiful sight. The water is really cold here too. And it's a nice peaceful sound. There's a beautiful view upward with some mist coming off the rocks and some water slowly coming down. You can choose to spend more or less time at the waterfall, but I personally spent about 30 minutes there because it was relaxing to see. I also decided to spend more time at the waterfall itself because the crowds had begun clearing after I arrived. If you get to the end of the trail and the area around the waterfall is pretty crowded, it's definitely worth your time to stay and wait a little bit for the crowds to clear, because I did stay for like 20 minutes and waited for the crowds to clear, and it was a really nice experience to pretty much have the whole place to yourself. The hike going back was equally easy because the majority of it was either flat or slightly downhill. As you're coming out, there's some really nice photo opportunities with the trees and the views here. As you're leaving the recreation area after you finish the hike and left the campsite, I'd recommend stopping at this small lake along the road, which easily could have been missed, but is directly outside of the recreation area and provides a very nice view. And here it is up close. Definitely a beautiful little place to stop if you'd like a view and a nice photo opportunity on your way out of the hiking trail and the campsite. This is between campsites 4 and 5, right where the entrance to the trail is. Again, if you have time. And that's all for today. Hopefully you enjoyed. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon for another video.